Welcome to the Awareness Space Podcast, a place where we explore what it means to live with a neurodivergent brain. I was diagnosed at 41 with ADHD. After 20 years of struggling with anxiety, depression, impulsivity, and a life-hindering, overactive mind, I found the answer. This podcast has a mission to interview as many people with a neurodivergent brain as we can in hope to raise awareness. Awareness that it's never too late to discover your truth. Join us every week as we talk with therapists, coaches, and people who can share their story. Getting the diagnosis is just the beginning. May we all thrive in our own way of life. Now let's dive in. Welcome back to the Awareness Space Podcast, a place where we honor and raise awareness of neurodivergent life. We are here for those who don't yet know they have ADHD and those trying to make sense of it all post-diagnosis. This is episode 1 of our series, Me, Myself and ADHD. I will dive into conversations with a guest on all things ADHD and other neurodivergent brain presentations, should they be part of their experience. We will cover the run-up to diagnosis, the diagnosis experience, and how life unfolded afterwards, including looking at guests' passions and how they thrive in their life. This is a big moment, guys. I haven't done this for a year, which is why I was missing out my intro there. But we are in episode 1, and I welcome my first ever guest based in and around ADHD, which is Sarah Delaney, who I met over on TikTok just about 2 weeks ago. So welcome to the Awareness Space, Sarah. Thank you for being with us. I mean, feel free to let us know a little bit about you as of today, as much as feels comfortable. But I just want to thank you. This is a big moment, episode 1. Thinking a year from now, when I've learned so much more, I'll be like, Sarah, can you believe it? So how are you feeling about being on the show?
Hi, Owen. Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm very nervous. I haven't done anything like this before. But as I said to you before this, really align with, helping people who haven't got a diagnosis yet or may not even know or have an idea that they might have ADHD. And I think that's something really important that those of us who have a diagnosis can really help others to be aware of.
Sure can. I mean, it can be a scary time before diagnosis when you're having all these things in your life that you struggle with or present, and you're like, wow, like I don't understand. No one seems to be able to figure out what's going on. And it's such a powerful and emotional moment, which we will talk about on your journey. But you're right, we're here to help people maybe get a sense of maybe this is what's happening to them and give them kind of a kick, like a reset for their life, which is certainly what happened to me. It's been 3 weeks, 3 weeks since diagnosis. It's a bit longer for you. So I'm hoping to learn from a little bit from you today about what it is to be with it, and your relationship with it. So we tend to start off with, rather than going right back to childhood, which a lot of shows may do, I want to know what was happening in your life when you thought, wow, hold on, is this ADHD? I want to know kind of where you were in your life and what was it that got to a point where you're like, I probably need to look into this. I would love to sort of start there.
Yeah. So, I find it funny, but the big moment, and I'm going straight for it there, but the big moment for me was I was scrolling TikTok,
Mm.
and I think it was Connor DeWolf came up, and I just thought, wow, okay, I'm aligning with everything that he's saying. And another person came up and it was doom piles. And I was like, right, okay, this is
Mm.
definitely, I've never heard anyone speak about doom piles before and I have a name for it. And then someone else came and on TikTok again and said, I feel like I'm a perfectionist, but I'm too lazy to do anything about it. And that sentence alone, I have said that sentence my whole life. And I thought, right, okay, maybe this is something that I need to look into. Um, and during this time, I was actually trying to get through my degree, and being back in education again was something that really highlighted a lot of my struggles. That you wouldn't have I wouldn't have really understood a lot of those until, for example, I'm trying to do assignments and get them done. And, that was when it was a real strong executive dysfunction that I hadn't really clicked onto until then.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? I'm doing my degree at the moment. I 100% agree with you on that. I'm really noticing the bits where I thrive and the bits where I'm struggling. And then it reminded me of my school life. I was like, oh God, yeah, I remember this. So what was that like for you? Do you recall that when you were in school, when you were younger? Was it the same? Did you notice it in the same way, or do you think in the years of wisdom that have gone by, it was easier to see it?
Well, I suppose I didn't notice it because I'm 35 now, and back then, people, it wasn't a thing. There wasn't an awareness of it in society. So while I would have found it really hard to sit in class, I would have been distracting others, things like that. Unfortunately, it was, you're a bad child. You have some behavioral issue, and there was a lot of shame,
Mm.
internalized shame that I felt, that now looking back I can really see. And unfortunately, I didn't make it through school. I was expelled from two schools by the time I got to secondary school. Um, and now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Of course it does. But and it was so obvious now with my diagnosis. But back then, it was just, I thought I was a bad child. Why couldn't I sit in class? Why couldn't I focus? Why couldn't I just do homework? You know,
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole other podcast talking about the school system, couldn't we? Uh, for sure.
absolutely.
And yeah, I don't remember anything from it's weird. Anything I thought was trauma. I just don't remember anything from primary school at all. Not the beginning of secondary school,
Mhm.
but my reports were saying distracting, speaks out loud, should have more control, seems to get distracted, all the classics. And I think if anybody listening, when you have your diagnosis, that's a big part of it, isn't it? A big part of it is they need to know either from an informant, from a family member, or from school reports, because they say it starts. That's when it starts. But in our age, because I'm 41, so we're not too far apart. And I don't recall too much neurodivergent chat in my school, particularly. What do you remember anything? Where was there a special hut? Do you remember where they used to send anybody that struggled? You get sent to a special hut at the bottom of playing fields. Do you
No,
remember much about
no,
that?
there was absolutely nothing. There was nothing like that. I was from my secondary school, and it was an old convent. And we were under the nuns, and even in primary school, there I don't remember, like, even neurodivergent. That it wasn't a word that I knew of, and I don't think it was a word that was generally known of in society either. Um, and I don't remember, there was no hut. I don't remember any children in my class with special needs or needed any, you know, extra learning support or anything. I just do not remember it in the system at all, unfortunately.
No, well, that's me. Me and my partner have our other show here on the awareness space called The Lost Generation. So we're the generation where we were just before. But now we get the chance, luckily, to know our truth. And coming back to the present day, then with the studying. So you're doing that, in some issues with executive functioning, and how that played out. So did you feel like you should look into it so you have a chance of completing the degree? And how did that look? Is that kind of how it unfolded?
So it was funny, like, I suppose I had gone to a counselor, and I had gone to a counselor. Now I had started over something else, and then throughout I had gone back to her just for total overwhelm with assignments through college, and this was a college counselor. And I remember the first time I mentioned it to her, and you know, she and through no fault of her own, she was absolutely amazing. But she would kind of skirt around it,
Mhm.
and she wouldn't try not to be, directly answer it, because I think she didn't have the knowledge herself about it, because this was only starting to become something spoken about at the time. Um, So she finally then, after me mentioning it multiple times, like, look, I think, I have ADHD. I'm seeing all these things, and I'm really like, I'm, I'm aligning with a lot of things that are being said. And she kind of had said, look, maybe it's not that. And she mentioned about the hyperactive boys and things like this.
Mm.
So I left it, and I suppose there was a part of me thinking, right, maybe I don't. Maybe I'm just a bad person, like I've taught my whole life, and maybe I just am defective and I can't do these things that other people can. And that was that. So the next year I came back to her again for the same thing, assignment season in the semester, couldn't cope, overwhelmed. And I was mid conversation with her, and she just stopped me and she said, Sarah, I actually do think you've all the classic symptoms of ADHD. And when she explained it to me, she said, I apologize. I have only just completed training on ADHD. We were all these counselors were sent out for this training. And then she was able to recognize the symptoms that I had been really telling her for 2 years. I was
Mm.
so upset. So all this overwhelm and totally freezing when I'm overwhelmed, trying to do assignments, which just resulted in me not being able to do assignments at all. Even though, like, when I actually do assignments and I sit down, I do quite well, but it's the starting. And it's also the perfectionism, if it's not going to be perfect, I can't do it, which
Mm.
is definitely a part of ADHD. And from there, thank God, she referred me to the college psychiatrist. And actually, it was quite quick from there. And I'm very, very lucky for that because, I think it's probably the same in UK, but in Ireland, the waiting lists are massive, public or private. Um, so I was very lucky that way. But again, it took that training and that awareness was only just starting to come out. So it took that counselor, who's absolutely fantastic, it took training for her to even recognize, oh, actually, there is these classic symptoms here, because there just wasn't the awareness of it even then, and that was only two years ago.
Yeah, thanks so much. There's so much in there actually, and I'm so glad that when you talk about the council, I was like, oh no, because I've heard this so many times. But that was so exciting when you said she'd done the training, and me and my partner have been talking about this a lot recently. It's like if they can make that part of coaching training, counseling training, I mean, it would be a game changer because I spent thousands of pounds on therapy and coaching, which has helped me in many ways, but they never saw that, so I've still felt very lost, or I wasn't feeling better with some of those symptoms. I think the more training, the better. But that will be for, again, another episode, bring the experts on. We'll talk all about that because it's so, so important. So I'm just really excited for you now for where you are in the story. So you're like, oh my God, someone sees it and honors that for you. So what happened next then? So waiting list either way. So how were you pulling? Because I was like, shall I go private? Shall I wait? It was a tricky one to decide on.
So for me, again, I was very lucky. It was all through college, and I have to say that I am in the small minority that got to do it that way. And it was before, again, the awareness was only just coming about at the time in Ireland. So there wasn't a waiting list. So basically, like, my counsellor came back to me and said the pathway has only just come in for me to refer for symptoms of this. So she referred through to the college psychiatrist, and I think it was within a few weeks I had to go to the college GP then, and I had to do the screening form. And from there, then I did, I think it was three long interviews. It was actually over an hour. Um, And then my mother had to fill out an interview and do a phone call, and I had to get reports then from my school, which was hard to do. But like yourself, like you were saying a while ago, it was the very typical distracting others, not meeting potential, well able but not able to focus, you know. So again, I consider myself extremely lucky that I got the pathway that I did, because I just see so many people really struggling with how they can get their diagnosis.
Yeah, and just to honor the journey you were on, and anybody listening that's like, wow, that sounds, might sound a bit overwhelming. There's loads of different pathways you can go down, and they all do it in slightly different ways. So that how I had my assessment compared to my partner last year was slightly different. So take your time and look around and see what private companies are out there and how they do it. It cost me a fair bit for mine, but I knew it would change my life, and it was really important. So I'm privileged enough that I was able to borrow that money, and I'll pay it back from my work. So anybody listening right now, so many pathways. Do your research, take your time. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So yeah, thank you so much for that, Sarah. So what I would really, so were you really wanting diagnosis? I'm always fascinated by this. What did you feel would change for you? What was the driving force at your core for wanting it? That's so fascinating.
I suppose for me, you know what? It was validation. It was like, I need to know that I'm not just a bad human. Because I spent my whole life not understanding why I couldn't do the same things that other people could do. Like, so, routine, keeping the house clean, all these very, what seem like simple things. I had so much shame. It's like, why can't I do these? Why do I feel so different to everybody else? And I would have spent a lot of time saying to my best friend, like, there's something wrong with me and I don't know what it is. I'm not the same as other people. And for me, when that started came up on TikTok and things, and it really made me push for it, because I wanted to know, and I really felt like I had ADHD by the time I was coming up to the assessment. I wanted to be able to say, you know, I'm not a bad person, and it's okay, and there's a reason for this. And you know, for those people who do struggle with these things and don't have ADHD, it still doesn't mean you're a bad person. And, people can struggle with executive dysfunction and not have ADHD. Doesn't mean that you're a bad person. But it was that internalized shame that so many people have with ADHD growing up and not realizing that I really needed that validation. And I tell you, I got it. I got that validation. Like, even coming up to the assessment, there was lots of things that, like, for example, if I have an occasion and people are coming to my house, that is my absolute nightmare. Like, oh my God, I have to clean the house. Oh my God, people are going to see the marks on the wall. Just things that a lot of people might not worry about. For me, stresses me so much out. So I would spend my time in freeze and not be able to do anything about it till 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I would be painting the bathroom. I would be scrubbing, like, these little marks on the top corner of the kitchen wall, like ridiculous things. And that would stress me out so much. But when I was coming up to this assessment, I remember I had an event like that, and I had people calling over, my family and things. And I was able to have a little bit of compassion for myself and say, actually, you do have ADHD. I knew at that time, you do have ADHD. It's okay. Relax. People aren't actually judging you as much as you think. And there's a reason for it. And even just having the names of these things, like executive dysfunction, overwhelm, was just a massive validating thing for me. And it really just helped me to kind of become more comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad you touched on that. Self-worth and self-esteem can quite often be in the toilet. It certainly was for me for about a year or two before this time. And that really needs to be honored because it's really hard to pull yourself out and want to have, to know about this, research about it. I mean, if you want to research about what you may have, you need an element of thinking you're worthy of discovering more about yourself. So it's a real tightrope there, and I really encourage people who aren't sure and been watching the TikToks going, "Oh my God!" It's like, yeah, you matter, and self-care has been a buzzword for the last decade. But I don't know about you, just off a slight tangent here, but what I've noticed in the 3 weeks since my diagnosis is that I used to think my whole holistic being, like all of me, was just a real problem. It was something that I just really struggle on. Maybe I just have to give up on my dreams and things like that. But self-care for me now is all about taking care of my brain. So it's like, okay, I'm here for my brain. I want to support my brain. I'm its friend. And it's more isolated. It's my brain rather than my whole being is somehow not right. And that's really powerful. It's validating that my brain is the one that needs my support and I may have the tools to do that. And it allows you to step back and not be defined by it. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what, like what you're saying about not being defined about it, and it's not just me as a person, it's my brain. Like eh, being able to having the recognition of that, um, and then being able to use that to look for the tools to actually give yourself the self care is beyond amazing, and again, I think that comes with the awareness of what you're trying to do, Owen. That comes with hearing, you know, this is the symptoms that I deal with, and someone going, "Oh, actually, I deal with that as well." Because you're saying about self care, and self care for a neurotypical person and self care for a neurodivergent person can be very different things. And just knowing that there's tools that you can do to help your neurodivergent brain is very powerful.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the tools, some of the tools you have, you can be quite creative with it. I'm certainly creative with some of mine, and I try and have a little bit of fun with it too. And people, some people might think it's weird that I have to do these things, especially for those who get socially burnt out, especially if you're ADHD. So autism with ADHD, it can be complicated in social situations. It completely wipes you out. So you may need to have the whole afternoon off to do this, or you may not be able to go to an event because you've already done these few things in the morning. You may feel silly and you can't do all of those, and you may need to have that discharge time. But for you to have a thriving full life, that's okay. That's totally cool that you need to do those things in whatever wonderful and crazy way. So I just need to be in the dark. I need to be in a room with no sound in the dark. I need 15 minutes. I may fall asleep, I may not, may shake my legs a little bit. And it really helps me just get out of that stimulation and then go back out. It's well, who cares? What's wrong with that? It's absolutely fine, isn't it?
Exactly. I love that you said that. It's so true. Like the need to recharge from social interaction. That's another thing that can bring so much shame. Like, I feel lazy. I'm being lazy. But actually, just having the self compassion and the knowledge as well, just to say, this is what I need, and this is totally okay. And I'm giving myself this care. I'm not going to feel guilty about it because this is what I need to recharge, and then move on as you need to. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, thank you. And it kind of touches a little bit on, they say rejection, sensitivity dysphoria disorder can be all part of this too. But I went in thinking, well, what I know is going to happen is I'm going to feel maybe seen afterwards and really held. But I was also where I might get rejected. No, that's not a thing. You're just being lazy. Some people, I knew who to mention it to and who not to afterwards because I knew they wouldn't get it. So what's the even point even beginning? So it's kind of like you go into it to feel seen, but there is a chance that they may not see it in you and say, "Oh, that's silly." But then it's about what's more important, my truth or sustaining these connections with every single person in my life in that way. So how was that for you? Did that cross your mind at all, or were you all in on this is my truth and whoever's with me is with me? Where were you on the spectrum?
No, I definitely had moments where I thought, God, other people are saying everybody's a little bit like this. And, I definitely had that. And there was times where I left that, invalidate me a little bit. And I think, that's not other people's fault. I think that again comes back to the
Yeah.
education and why people with the diagnoses voices are so important, because again it comes back to education. But yes, I would have had even family members who meant no harm, like how did we get on years ago? There was none of this years ago. And that can be invalidating if you allow it. And I did allow it at times. But being able to recognize in myself that I did have these symptoms, and regardless of whether I had a diagnosis or not, I needed tools to be able to help myself and have compassion for myself. And thankfully, with the diagnosis, that helped, that I could say I do have ADHD and allow myself to have more compassion and kind of stick up for myself and advocate for myself to people. Um, and I find it quite sad that I needed the diagnosis to be able to advocate for myself for that. And sometimes, even having the diagnosis, people will dismiss it. But again, that's why people's voices who are neurodivergent, that's why it's so important to just get that information out there so that society understands, one, how disabling and how hard it is, and what a struggle it is. And two, you know, I suppose one of my pet hates, and I think a lot of people have come across this, is, oh, everybody's a little bit ADHD. And yes, there's people do in daily life struggle with things like disorganization and, finding certain little things hard. But when ADHD comes into it, and what actually makes it ADHD is when it affects your life and yourself to the point that it's affecting all areas or a lot of areas of your life. And it's not just I'm a little bit stressed, or I can't do this, that, or the other. It's not just it's a real, sorry, I don't know how to word what I'm saying. It's a real impact, a real severe impact for me. It was a real severe impact to all areas of my life. And with education, we can stop that, minimization of people who are neurodivergent symptoms, because that's what it comes down to, and that's what it feels like on the opposite end. But again, it's not people's fault. It's just about awareness and education on how it actually does affect people.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think you're right. I think the only reason it matters, other than, our self-belief and our self-worth, is if it impacts our life. I needed to know, because there were some real blocks for me, and it'd be nice just to know why that would be. I just don't get it. I'm so intelligent, I'm so creative, and really good with people. I was like, I just don't get it. I thought it was trauma for so long. I just didn't understand it. So if it does affect your life, then it's worth going on that journey. But there's something you talked about there about everyone's a little bit ADHD. I saw a video yesterday which I really, really liked, which was, that's like saying everyone's a bit bipolar, because sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're happy. So in a day, you can be happy and sad in one day. Oh, everyone's a bit bipolar. You would never say that, because it's a brain thing. It's a brain wiring condition, which is what ADHD is, but it's just not seen in the same way because it's tarnished with the schoolboys running around, not sitting down. But that's an example of what it's like. So much about ADHD is about regulating thoughts, energy, and emotions, and focus, of course. So it's all about regulation. And the brain is a little bit low in dopamine, so that affects the brain chemistry. So it's literally a brain wiring is the best way to look at it. It's our ability to regulate naturally. We have to put work in to try and actually regulate emotions, energy, and thoughts. So people need to look at it that way. It's the brain is operating in a way that makes regulation hard. And when I explain that to people so far that are unsure about ADHD, they go, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, I don't have that. Um, some days I have anxiety, and I'm like, okay, well, for me, anxiety can come at any time, in any moment, for no particular reason that I could see. And that actually massively impacts my life. Other people have anxiety, but it's totally different because it comes and goes, whereas mine is really linked to overstimulation, overfocusing. People shouldn't have full-blown anxiety from focusing on an assignment for an hour. For me, that didn't feel right, hence why I need to look into it. So does that kind of make sense? Like, oh, everyone's a bit bipolar, everyone's got depression. It's
Absolutely.
silly just because you're sad. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That does make sense. And it's funny that you brought up trauma as well. You know, I do think that people who are neurodivergent and have gone through their lives without a diagnosis, like it's highly interlinked. You know, there's so many people who do have trauma because it is traumatic. It's traumatic with internal and external shame. Um, because you're growing up your whole life with other people um drawing attention to these symptoms, and you're not understanding your own symptoms. And it's I feel that for me personally, you know, it was you're the bad child, you have behavioral issues, you're just, you know, you you know, I was always in trouble in school and things like that. So that was traumatic. And for many people, I think if you are out there and um, you know, you are wondering about whether you have ADHD, and some people will say, "Oh, is it ADHD or PTSD or things like that?" They're highly interlinked, and it's okay and it's normal to feel traumatized by your journey throughout life. It's hard. It's extremely hard, and again, I think that's why it comes back to, you know, the voices like yourself, Owen, and myself, and people who have diagnosis, to say that, you know, it is something that is felt an awful lot, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because if they say ADHD will develop or, from birth, however you want to see it, but it starts to, I think it was like 8 and 12, something like that, where may start to present itself on a high level. But you chuck trauma on top of that, some of the responses that our body has and our nervous system has and our brain has to trauma are very similar presentations. But imagine layering trauma on top of an ADHD brain. You're just going to enhance it. And there's a lot of research into those in prison and those of addiction and high suicide rates, that there's a big trauma correlation, but there's also a high ADHD correlation to a lot of what's happening in the prison systems and addiction, because we can't regulate in the way that keeps us able to stay stable on a daily basis. So of course, we're going to be looking for ways to regulate because we're unaware of our ADHD. So by having that, it can empower you back that, okay, I have low dopamine. That's part of it. You get a low dopamine. So therefore you're looking for dopamine, and you can see where that could lead us down all kinds of roads. But you can take control back and say, okay, I need dopamine. Cool. So what are all the cool and wonderful, amazing ways through research that I can access my dopamine? So how do you find your kind of levels, your mood levels, and that sort of dopamine feel? How does that experience look for you?
So before, and it's funny that you brought up addiction because, like, you know, as you know, Owen, addiction is massively comorbid with people who are neurodivergent and have ADHD. I definitely spent a lot of my life dopamine seeking without realizing it. And when I was younger, as a teenager, I would have had awful issues with alcohol, and it would have been a vicious cycle of drinking to stop a panic attack, and then hungover, and of course more panic attacks, and then drinking again to try and stop that. And actually, I've spoken to a lot of people with ADHD who have gone through that same cycle, and unfortunately, that can lead to alcoholism or, you know, drug addiction for lots of people. As I got older, then in my life as an adult, again, I would have had, let's say, a bottle of wine at the weekend, or if I was stressed, I would have to have a bottle of wine or things like that. But actually, thank God, after I started the medication, I've stopped drinking. I haven't drank in a year. Um, and I fully believe that that's because I don't need the dopamine now. My dopamine has regulated with the medication. And medication, I'm not saying is for everybody, but for me personally, it has been absolutely life changing. And I'm a lot more settled in myself. I can just do things. I'm not overthinking. I'm not. Now, I'm not saying all the time. It's not a huge. It's not like a total magic wand. I still am struggling with assignment season right now, um, but I'm not reaching for that bottle of wine. I just don't feel the need for it. I just don't even want alcohol. And it's not that I made a decision or I need to give up alcohol. It's just I don't feel the need for it. Um, I, as I said, I can just do things. Before, I would go into total freeze, overwhelm, especially during assignment season. Like my whole house would just be turned upside down, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do the very basics of I need to send a letter, I need to send an email. All of it would get on top of me. And now I just don't think I can just do. And it's been absolutely amazing. But even before the medication, again, just having the knowledge, okay, this is executive dysfunction. This I am in freeze mode right now. Like that even helped in itself. And being able to I had access to an occupational therapist who gave me amazing tips, like, you know, set a timer and try to finish something before the timer goes off.
Mhm.
Or I another thing I used to before I started the medication, I had the words and the knowledge then of what it was. I would just pick up the sweeping brush when I was on the phone to
Mm.
somebody, and I think the name for that is body doubling.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't realize that at the time, but I just it I those little tools before I even had medication was just fantastic, and that comes back to like knowing this is overwhelmed, this is executive dysfunction, because I was replacing that before with I'm a lazy person and I'm a bad person, and that would make me sink even deeper into total freeze and can't do anything,
Yeah, thanks so much. It's like the medication thing's fascinating. We could do a whole episode on that. Should you take it, should you not, pros and cons. But I've heard so much good stuff about it, and I'm 3 weeks in, so who knows where it's going to go. But there's something you talked about there, which was really powerful, which is learning how it presents. So we talk about the presentations that our ADHD cause, behavioral presentations. They're the things that really matter. So you've got the ADHD diagnosis, you've got the label, however you want to use it. Some people may find it really useful to use it quite a lot out in the world. Some people might feel like, oh, I don't want to keep just saying, oh, I'm just ADHD, which then makes you feel like you don't have to do anything about it. I've got ADHD, so I don't need to do that. But the really important thing is to learn about your presentations and have the words, like you said, understand what the words mean. So executive functioning, what does that mean? Understanding different parts of your brain. So the default mode network at the back of your brain, your task positive network. You start to learn about all those things. That's when you can really start making changes. You're like, oh my God, this presentation, this is and then you know how to pace your life, how to plan things in advance. And that means you can thrive a lot more. Especially with studying, is finding your way to study in a way which means that you can keep the environment you're in calm, you have access to dopamine-rich experiences whilst you're studying, whether it's using fidget toys, or for me, it'll be a couple of scoops of Ben & Jerry's. That gets me right back on track. That gets me some dopamine, fairly healthy, as long as I keep it to a minimum. But what you said there is really powerful, is understanding the terminology, and maybe a bit of the science can be quite useful about how your brain's doing it. So you can go, okay, cool. I need nature. I need to be in a vast space. So I'm just going to pop out. And these are all seem really obvious things, right? But they talk about connection. They talk about nature, good diet, good sleep. I mean, we all need those things. But I think with ADHD, we particularly need to engage in those things as much as we can to give our brain a chance to keep coming back to a grounded place and not flighty all over the place. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that? The kind of like understanding some of the science just a little bit so we can kind of be empowered.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's really important, and that's again why I think our voices are so important, you know. So, like, what I would say to anybody who are thinking, right, I definitely think I have symptoms of ADHD and I considering going and getting a diagnosis. There's no harm whatsoever in going and looking up maybe a bit of a science, or if that's not your thing, like the symptoms and what are the recommendations that help people. There's no harm in putting those into place because you know it can only benefit everybody anyway. But like that, you know, for ADHD in particular, um yeah, just exploring it, you know, like we have the internet at our fingertips, we have so many resources, thankfully. um Anybody who's considering it, I absolutely would encourage to just go and yeah, look up about ADHD and apply those useful tools. You don't need a diagnosis to do that.
Yeah, there's plenty of people out there with self-diagnosis while they're waiting, especially in the UK, NHS waiting lists are crazy, talking a couple of years here. So a lot of people need that diagnosis so they can get the medication. So the medication will be free for the NHS. If you go private, you have to pay, and that's pricey. And that's the heartbreaking part for me. That's the heartbreaking part. I've gone private, so it cost me a lot to get the diagnosis in the first place. Now, if I want medication, I'm going to have to pay even more. So I might have to now wait and go into the NHS system to try and get through that. So it's a very fascinating different pathways for it. But right now, I'm going to do what you said. I'm going to troll these different ways of attending to myself, attending to my body and my mind. But I'm finding just talking about it, doing this with you today, which has been amazing, is really healing. Doing the videos and getting people voting on the polls that I do is really, really powerful, getting a sense how people feel. So the other day, it was yesterday actually, I did a poll of 4 classic presentations, and everybody said constant thinking. That was the main one. Everybody said that you can't switch your mind off. It's just everywhere you go, outside, inside, round people, not round people. It's like, just shut up, brain, please. And you have to find compassion. You have to meet it with compassion because it's frustrating and very annoying. But you have to find a way to have beautiful tools like me. If I go into a dark space and I rock my legs a little, or I got like a massage machine thing that you can put on, which is really powerful. Just find beautiful ways to give your mind a chance to calm itself down. You're going to have to help. You can't, it's not the other way around. And I mean, with the medication, what's the thinking like now? Is it kind of like, do you feel like you may be a neurotypical thinker, or is it patchy and you have patches of peace? What does it feel like?
I don't think I'll ever be a neurotypical thinker, definitely not. But I said this to my sister when I first tried the medication. It was like it was so I couldn't describe the feeling. It was like just one thought, or like I couldn't hear. Do you know, like you'd have like I would have a million different voices and trains of thought going on in my head, and like before I had the ADHD diagnosis, I just didn't know. I didn't realize that that was stressing out all the time. But then I took the medication, and like, so I go back to the cleaning, for example, because that's been the biggest thing for me. Like, the thoughts would just go into such a tumble that I would go into freeze mode. But then with the medication, I just don't think about it. It's not I don't need to do the thinking work
Mhm.
before I do it. I do not need to like push myself. I just do it. It's that's the only way I can describe it. It's very strange. Like and it's amazing. It's not strange. It's amazing.
Mhm.
But it's funny. Like you said, you know, like when you are your thoughts are racing and you do a massage and things like that. I didn't even click that that was what I needed. Like for example, when I was struggling with assignments, and I still do struggle with assignments, but I would drink a million coffees and I'd be patting myself on the back and I'd be trying to rear myself up to go, like, and the occupational therapist was like, Sarah, that's not actually what you need. You're already in heightened mode. You actually need to calm yourself. You think that you need to ramp yourself up to do this. You actually don't. You need to calm yourself down. And I just never, that had never clicked with me, I was thinking I need to, but sure, I was already 90 in my mind. I need to do this and getting caught up in little details of random things. And I actually just needed to step back and take a breath and calm my brain. But it took an occupational therapist to make me realize that. I hadn't realized that.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're in a keep going, never give up culture, aren't we? So I think ADHDs are already up against it because we're told that that's what you have to do anyway if you want to succeed in anything. So we know we have to be a lot more creative about it, which I think is quite a powerful tool. We have to be very creative with how we get stuff done. I'm very proud of that. I've always been very good at that, very creative. But yeah, as we come towards the end of our conversation, it's been so amazing. Perhaps so. I mean, we've covered so much. It's been fantastic. So, how is life for you in this moment? So, you've got the medication that helps you through, and you're able to carry on with your studying. So, how do you feel mostly about yourself in the present day? And do you feel like you're thriving in your life to a certain extent?
So I do. I have a lot more compassion for myself. I'm able to do a lot more things. I as I said, like, my routine at home is amazing. I never had a routine,
Mhm.
so that for me is the main thing. That has been amazing. But the I suppose right now in my life, just knowing that I have ADHD, being able to explain to people, right, I'm struggling a little bit with this, and this is why, and having I have a lot more confidence in myself. My self esteem is better just from the diagnosis alone. Like, as I said, the medication isn't a magic tool and it's not for everybody. Like, just the diagnosis alone was validating and helped me to have more compassion. I feel like I still struggle. Like, college and assignments will never be for me. And it's not like I am intelligent. Like,
Mm.
everybody listening is, we're all intelligent. I won't say I'll ever be academic, but, like, I'm a doer. Like, a lot of people with ADHD are learn by, I work. I'm training to be a nurse, so I go into the ward. I learn a lot, and that's where I thrive. So, just, I suppose, with college as well, just having the compassion for myself that, like, throwing an assignment together and getting the marks, whatever I get, doesn't mean that I'm less of a person, or, I just, that alone, the compassion for myself is what has been the best thing for me after diagnosis.
That's such a lovely anchor to this show, to this first episode of the show, because compassion is definitely, you grieve at the beginning, you get your diagnosis, there's grief there, what has been, what I didn't do, but then there's the compassion of, well, I got through, how cool is that? And it's been so powerful that I had the ability to get to this point, and now I can move forward with all this knowledge we talked about. I think the key thing from today was the knowledge of understanding our experience, and then be able to apply compassion on top of that. So then we can start to move forward, which is just full of hope. And we want people to know, who are like, oh, should I get going for assessment? It's like there can be so much hope at the end of that diagnosis. And even if you don't get it, they're looking for other things. They'll be looking for other stuff for you. Is it anxiety disorder? Is it depression? It's great. That means they could flag something up and ask you, maybe you might want to go and look into that. At least you're going to get something out of it. Um, and I went into it going, oh my God, what if I don't get it? What does that mean now? So that's part of it too, guys. You have to think about that. But yeah, what would be in the cheesiest way possible? I've done podcasting for many years, and you always got to end with a bit of cheese. So what would be your message to anybody out there who is struggling and feeling a bit lost? I'm not telling you whether you should tell them to have an assessment or not, but more, what is some hope that you can offer them regardless of assessment, in regards to their presentations? Give people some hope at the end of all of this.
I would say that we're all out here. We have people at our fingertips. There's people to talk to everywhere. Even if you don't have people in your immediate life that can relate to you or how you're feeling, there's people online like Owen. I've met Owen through social media. There's so many resources out there to be able to give yourself that little bit of compassion. And I suppose, like you said, Owen, there is a part, and I felt that too, of waiting on the diagnosis and what if I don't get it. Some people who do have ADHD don't end up getting a diagnosis, and that happens, and it doesn't mean that you're less of a person or that you don't struggle with these things. Just compassion is the main thing, and there's people out there that can help you to have that compassion for yourself.
Surely. And what we have learned about how to tend to ourselves, we can offer that knowledge to even neurotypicals. What we learn can help any human maybe meet those things. So getting better sleep, eating better, getting out in nature, the vastness, even animals. I find my cat he's like the dopamine king every time I see him. Makes me feel so good. So it's we as oh my alarm's going off. Oh my God, we had such a good run. So no, edit that, Owen. My first edit of the day. Right, when was I? Yeah, so as neurodivergent beings, we can help neurotypical beings thrive, and likewise the other way. And I think that's amazing. It's not us and them. It's about us all understanding each other so we can best tend to each other as well as ourselves. So really, really powerful. I just want to thank you so much for today. This has been really special. And obviously we hadn't really met prior to this. We had a few messages on TikTok and Instagram and things like that. And it's just so beautiful to have met so many amazing people in 3 weeks. And here I am sat on Zoom with a new friend all the way in Ireland. And that's just really, really exciting. And I know this is kind of like your first time doing this sort of thing. So I want to thank you for putting yourself out there and for doing something so lovely for other people who are listening in. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you too, Owen. Thanks very much for having me and for everything that you do as well. It's really, really important.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're all going to be doing it together. So I always say to every guest, it'd be lovely to have you back on sometime where we can actually break down maybe into the school system in the 90s, in the early noughties. But
I have so much to say about that.
that's for another time. And seeing how far we've come, my partner's been within the school industry, not industry, but within the school sector for a long time. So we're seeing it from the inside. It's very fascinating stuff. A lot better. But that's certainly for another day. But yeah, thank you so much. And if anybody's listening that's had their diagnosis and they found this useful and they want to come and share their story, then yes, do what Sarah's done here and come on. I'd love to meet you and add more friends to my ever-growing distant friends list. And yeah, just such a powerful time. So thank you, Sarah, for being on the show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be back in episode 2 for some more me, myself, and ADHD.